thousands of years before the rise of the Inca, long before the Maya carved their calendars into stone. A silent revolution took place in the arid coastal valleys of Peru. While the pyramids of Giza were being raised across the Atlantic, an equally ambitious civilization was emerging in the Supe Valley. For centuries, these ruins remained buried under layers of dust and time, forgotten by history. This is Caral, the oldest city in the Americas, a place where humanity first mastered the art of urban living in the Western Hemisphere, challenging everything we thought we knew about the origins of complex society. The transition was not born of conquest or kings, but of a unique relationship between the desert and the sea. Unlike the cradles of civilization in Mesopotamia or China, Caral did not rely on grain. Instead, its people looked to the Pacific Ocean and the fertile riverbanks. Here, the first steps toward a complex state were taken by humble fishermen and farmers who realized that cooperation offered more than survival. It offered power. The silence of the desert hides the echoes of a bustling trade network that connected the heights of the Andes to the crashing waves of the coast. For modern archaeology, the discovery of Caral was a seismic shift. In 1994, Dr. Ruth Shady and her team began excavating a site that many had dismissed as natural hills. What they uncovered was a sprawling urban complex covering over 150 acres. Carbon dating sent shockwaves through the scientific community, placing the site's peak at 2600 BCE. This was a sophisticated society that thrived without the invention of pottery or the use of bronze. It existed in a chronological vacuum, proving that the drive to build monumental structures is an inherent part of the human spirit, regardless of geography. To understand Caral, one must understand its environment. The Supe Valley is a narrow green ribbon cutting through a landscape of unforgiving stone and sand. This proximity to different ecological zones allowed the inhabitants to diversify their resources. In the valley floors, they grew industrial crops like cotton and gourds, while the nearby ocean provided an endless supply of protein. This wasn't just a settlement, it was a strategic hub. The geography dictated the architecture, leading to the creation of massive platform mounds that mirrored the surrounding mountains, blending the man-made with the natural world in a seamless, sacred geometry. At the heart of the city stands the Pyramide Mare, a monumental feat of engineering. Rising nearly 60 feet high and spanning the length of 2 football fields, it was the center of religious and political life. The builders used shicras, woven reed bags filled with stones, to create a stable foundation that could withstand the frequent earthquakes of the region. This ingenious solution demonstrates a profound understanding of structural physics. Standing atop the pyramid, the leaders of Caral could oversee the entire valley, their authority reinforced by the sheer scale of the stone and mortar rising from the earth. Perhaps the most startling discovery at Caral is what archaeologists did not find. There are no city walls, no weapons, and no evidence of human sacrifice or skeletal remains showing signs of violent conflict. While other early civilizations were forged in the fires of war, Caral appears to have been a society built on commerce and ritual. Peace was not a byproduct of isolation, but a deliberate social structure. The city was a neutral ground where different groups could trade and worship, suggesting that the earliest foundations of American civilization were rooted in diplomacy and mutual benefit rather than conquest. Cotton was the gold of the Supe Valley. While they did not weave it into elaborate clothing for everyone, it was the primary currency of their trade empire. Caral's farmers bred a variety of cotton that grew in different natural shades: brown, beige and white. This fiber was essential for making the massive fishing nets used by coastal villages. In exchange for these nets, the people of Caral received anchovies and sardines, a high-protein diet that fueled their massive construction projects. This symbiotic relationship between the coast and the inland valley became the blueprint for Andean prosperity for millennia to come. Long before the Inca used the quipu to manage their empire, the people of Caral may have developed the prototype for this complex record-keeping system. Archaeologists discovered a collection of knotted strings during the excavation, suggesting that these ancient people had a way to record data, census information, or perhaps even celestial observations without a written alphabet. This tactile language of knots represents a sophisticated leap in cognitive development. It allowed the administration of a large population, tracking the distribution of resources and the cycles of the sun, ensuring the city's survival through periods of drought or environmental change. Culture in Caral was not merely utilitarian, it was deeply musical and artistic. Excavations in a special ritual area revealed 32 flutes made of condor and pelican bones, and 38 cornets crafted from deer and llama bones. These instruments were decorated with intricate carvings of monkeys, birds, and human figures. The presence of these instruments suggests that music played a vital role in communal ceremonies, echoing through the stone plazas. This wasn't a silent, grim city, but a place where sound and rhythm were used to unify the population and connect them to the spiritual forces they believed governed their world. The architectural signature of Caral is the circular sunken plaza. These massive depressions in the earth, located in front of the pyramids, served as the primary gathering points for the public. They represent a cosmic theater, where religious rituals were performed in the sight of the gods and the community. By descending into the earth, participants entered a sacred space that connected the underworld with the celestial realm above. This design reflects a complex worldview where the physical layout of the city was a map of the universe, anchoring the people of the Supe Valley to the eternal cycles of nature. The economy of the Supe Valley was anchored by a revolutionary crop, industrial cotton. Unlike the edible plants that sustained their bodies, cotton sustained their industry. By selectively breeding the plant, Caral's farmers produced fibers of varying natural shades, from soft creams to deep browns. These fibers were spun into strong cords, used for the creation of massive fishing nets. This innovation allowed the inland city to forge a symbiotic relationship with coastal fishing villages, trading agricultural surplus for high-protein seafood, creating a unique economic loop that powered their growth and supported a massive labor force for construction. Caral functioned as the heart of a vast regional trade network, acting as a bridge between the Pacific coast and the high Andean peaks. This was not a closed society. Archaeological evidence reveals spondylus shells from the tropical waters of modern-day Ecuador and exotic pigments from the deep rainforests. The exchange of goods went beyond simple survival, introducing luxury items and ritualistic materials that elevated the social status of the elites. Long-distance caravans, likely utilizing human porters, traversed rugged terrains, weaving a web of interconnectedness that predates the great civilizations of Mesoamerica by thousands of years. One of the most startling discoveries at Caral is the complete absence of defensive walls, battlements, or specialized weaponry. While other early civilizations often rose through conquest and military might, Caral appears to have been built on a foundation of commerce and shared religious ideology. The excavations have yielded no mass graves of conflict victims or depictions of warriors and captives. This suggests a period of prolonged peace that lasted for centuries, where resources were funneled into monumental architecture and public works rather than the machinery of war, marking it as a unique anomaly in human history. Though located miles inland, Caral's diet was surprisingly maritime. Analysis of organic remains shows that the inhabitants relied heavily on small, fatty fish, like anchovies and sardines. This marine protein, harvested using the sophisticated nets provided by the city's cotton farmers, provided the caloric foundation necessary for a large, sedentary population to flourish in a desert environment. The alliance between the inland farmers and coastal fishers created a stable food supply, insulating the civilization from the volatility of local crop failures and allowing the labor force to focus on constructing their massive stone pyramids and ceremonial centers. The ingenuity of Caral's engineers is best seen in their use of shicras. These were hand-woven vegetable fiber bags filled with large stones, which formed the core of their monumental structures. This was not merely a convenient way to transport materials. The shicras served a vital architectural purpose. By creating a flexible foundation of individual stone-filled units, the pyramids gained a degree of seismic resistance. When earthquakes struck, a frequent occurrence in the Andean region, the bags would shift independently, absorbing the energy and preventing the massive walls from collapsing, a testament to their advanced understanding of structural physics. Power in Caral was likely held by a class of priest administrators who governed through the lens of divine order. These leaders did not rule through force, but through their perceived ability to communicate with the heavens and ensure the cycles of nature remained favorable. The city's layout, with its hierarchical arrangement of pyramids and residences, suggests a highly stratified society where religious authority dictated the flow of daily life. From the top of the Great Pyramid, the elite could observe the celestial movements, using their astronomical knowledge to schedule planting, harvesting, and the elaborate rituals that kept the cosmos in balance. Beyond the utility of fishing nets, the people of Caral mastered the art of complex weaving. Their textiles were more than just protection from the elements. They served as indicators of social rank and identifiers of cultural identity. Artisans used natural dyes and intricate patterns to create garments that reflected the natural world around them. These weavers were the keepers of a visual language, embedding symbols of the flora and fauna of the Supo Valley into the very fabric of their society. This textile tradition would become a cornerstone of Andean culture, persisting for millennia long after Caral itself had turned to dust. Within the inner chambers of the temples, archaeologists found small, circular altars with central fire pits. These sacred hearths were equipped with underground ventilation shafts that utilized the wind to keep the fires burning at high temperatures. These fires were not for warmth or cooking, but for the ritualistic burning of offerings. Smoke rising from these pits was seen as a medium of communication, carrying the prayers and sacrifices of the people upward to the gods. The persistent presence of ash and charred remains indicates that these sacred fires were maintained with great care, symbolizing the eternal life of the city. Caral was a masterpiece of urban planning, divided into distinct residential and public zones. The city was organized into an upper and lower section, reflecting a social duality common in later Andean civilizations. The upper half housed the most impressive pyramids and the residences of the elite, while the lower half contained smaller structures and workshops. This deliberate organization ensured that the movement of people and the distribution of resources were efficiently managed. Every stone placed and every path cleared was a reflection of a society that valued order, hierarchy, and a clear sense of communal purpose in their harsh environment. Life in the Supe Valley was a constant negotiation with the environment. The civilization thrived by harnessing the river's seasonal floods to irrigate their fields in an otherwise arid landscape. However, this dependence made them vulnerable to the whims of climate change. Evidence suggests that the people of Caral were acutely aware of their fragile existence, leading them to develop sophisticated water management systems. Their survival hinged on a delicate balance between human ingenuity and the natural world, a balance that they maintained for nearly 1,000 years before environmental shifts eventually forced them to abandon their stone-wrought paradise. While many ancient civilizations centered their growth on cereal crops, the people of the Supe Valley prioritized industrial agriculture. Their most significant crop was cotton, grown in various natural shades from creamy white to deep brown. This was not merely for clothing, but served as the backbone of their entire economy. The arid climate preserved these fibers, allowing archaeologists to uncover the sophisticated spinning and weaving techniques that defined their early industry. Cotton fields stretched across the valley floor, meticulously irrigated and tended by a population that recognized the material's immense trade value across the Andean region. The true genius of Caral's economy lay in the transformation of raw cotton into specialized fishing nets. These nets were a technological marvel of the time, utilizing precise knotting techniques that increased the efficiency of coastal harvests. This innovation created a symbiotic relationship between the inland farmers and the coastal fishermen. The farmers provided the nets, and in exchange, they received a steady supply of protein-rich marine life. This interregional cooperation was the engine of their prosperity, fostering a society built on mutual dependence and specialized labor rather than isolated self-sufficiency. Caravans of traders traversed the unforgiving desert corridors, bridging the gap between the fertile valleys and the Pacific shore. These were not casual journeys. They were the lifelines of the civilization, requiring deep knowledge of the terrain and seasonal weather patterns. The paths were marked by the footprints of thousands, carrying bundles of dried fish, salt, and cotton. This movement of goods ensured that even those living miles from the ocean had access to the sea's bounty, while coastal dwellers enjoyed the agricultural surplus of the valley, creating a unified economic zone that spanned diverse ecological niches. At the coastal sites like Aspero, the scale of the maritime harvest was staggering. Archaeologists have found massive deposits of anchovy and sardine remains, indicating that these small fish were the primary protein source for the entire Supe civilization. The sheer volume of fish processed suggests an industrial-scale operation. The fish were likely dried and salted to prevent spoilage during the trek back to the inland pyramids. This abundance of food allowed for a population explosion, providing the caloric energy necessary for the massive labor force required to build the great stone monuments of the valley. One of the most profound discoveries at Caral was a quipu, a recording device made of knotted strings. While the complex quipus of the later Inca Empire are well known, this early version suggests that the foundations of Andean administrative accounting were laid thousands of years earlier. These knots likely recorded demographic data, resource inventories, or calendar dates. The presence of such a system indicates a high level of bureaucratic organization. It shows that the leaders of Caral were not just architects of stone, but also architects of information, managing their complex society through a tactile, coded language of thread. Music played a vital role in the spiritual life of the Supe Valley, evidenced by the discovery of 32 flutes carved from condor and pelican bones. These instruments were found bundled together in a sacred deposit, decorated with intricate carvings of mythical figures and animals. When played, they produced a haunting, ethereal sound that would have echoed through the plazas during communal rituals. The craftsmanship required to hollow and notch these bones reflects a society that valued artistic expression as much as engineering. These flutes were the voice of the city, connecting the people to the heavens and the natural world. The reach of Caral's influence extended far beyond the Supe Valley, stretching into the humid jungles of the Amazon. Excavations have revealed exotic goods such as spondylus shells from the tropical waters of modern-day Ecuador and feathers from rainforest birds. These items were highly prized status symbols, used in elite jewelry and ritual offerings. The presence of these materials suggests a vast, peaceful trade network that crossed the formidable Andes Mountains. Caral acted as a central hub, a cosmopolitan desert metropolis where the treasures of the coast, the mountains, and the jungle converged through diplomacy and exchange. Unlike many other early civilizations, there is a striking absence of evidence for warfare in the Supe Valley. No fortified walls, no weapons of war, and no mutilated remains have been found from its peak period. This suggests that the social hierarchy was maintained through religious ideology and economic success rather than military force. The elite likely derived their power from their ability to organize trade, predict the seasons, and mediate with the gods. It was a civilization built on the power of the word, the ritual, and the contract, marking a rare period of prolonged peace in human history. To protect their massive pyramids from the frequent earthquakes that plagued the region, the builders of Caral invented an ingenious engineering solution: shicras. These were woven vegetable fiber bags filled with large stones, placed at the core of the structures. During a seismic event, the stones inside the bags would move slightly, dissipating the earthquake's energy and preventing the stone walls from collapsing. This sophisticated understanding of structural dynamics allowed their monuments to survive for 5 millennia. These hidden bags of stone are a testament to a people who did not just build for the present, but for eternity, through scientific observation. The orientation of the pyramids was not accidental. They were precisely aligned with celestial bodies. The Great Pyramid, for instance, aligns with the rising of certain stars and the movement of the sun during the solstices. This suggests that the priests of Caral were skilled astronomers who used the sky as a giant calendar to manage agriculture and religious festivals. By mirroring the order of the cosmos in their architecture, they believed they were ensuring the continued favor of the gods and the stability of their world. The city was a terrestrial map of the heavens, etched in stone and clay. Beyond the Supe Valley, the reach of Caral extended hundreds of miles. Explorers have discovered spondylus shells, native to the warm tropical waters of modern-day Ecuador, within the city's ruins. These spiny crimson shells were not mere ornaments. They were red gold, a sacred commodity that signaled high status and divine connection. Their presence reveals a sophisticated network of long-distance trade that predates established Mesoamerican roots by centuries. The people of Caral were not isolated. They were the central hub of a vast continental exchange system that linked the high Andes to the tropical northern coasts. The survival of Caral depended on a mastery of water in a desert landscape. Engineers designed complex irrigation canals that diverted snowmelt from the distant Andes into the arid valley floor. This was a triumph of hydrologic planning, turning parched earth into a lush agricultural engine. By controlling the flow of water, the leadership ensured a surplus of food which in turn allowed for the specialization of labor. No longer was every person a farmer. Some could now be architects, astronomers, or weavers, as the diverted rivers fed the city's ambition and allowed for growth. While other civilizations focused on grain, Caral built its wealth on cotton. This wasn't just for garments, but for industrial use. They bred a specific species of cotton, Gossypium barbadense, which yielded long, strong fibers. This industrial crop allowed for the mass production of fishing nets and clothing. The sheer volume of cotton production suggests a centralized management system, where the harvest was meticulously recorded and distributed. It was this soft, white fiber that became the true currency of the Supe Valley, fueling an economy that traded land-based textiles for the sea's bounty in a complex barter system. The relationship between the inland pyramids and the coastal fishing villages was a symbiotic masterpiece. Every day, runners would travel the miles between the valley and the Pacific, carrying dried fish and mollusks to the city. In return, the coastal dwellers received the essential cotton nets needed to harvest the rich Humboldt current. This exchange of protein for technology created one of the world's first integrated economies. It was a partnership of mutual survival, where the salt of the sea and the soil of the valley merged to sustain a growing population in a harsh environment. At the heart of Caral's spiritual life were the circular altars, where sacred fires burned continuously. These structures featured unique underground ducts that utilized the Venturi effect, drawing in fresh air to keep the flames roaring without the need for manual bellows. This architectural ingenuity allowed priests to maintain intense, controlled fires for rituals that could last days. The smoke, rising into the desert night, was seen as a messenger to the heavens. Here, the physical laws of airflow were harnessed to serve the metaphysical needs of the soul, blending primitive science and ancient sanctity. Culture flourished in the shadow of the pyramids, evidenced by the discovery of 32 flutes made from condor and pelican bones. These instruments, decorated with carvings of monkeys and birds, suggest that music was an integral part of both public festivals and private reflection. The tuning of these flutes reveals a sophisticated understanding of acoustics and musical scales. When played, the haunting melodies would have echoed through the plazas, creating a shared auditory experience that reinforced communal bonds. In Caral, the sound of the wind through bone was the voice of the civilization itself, bridging the gap between man and nature. The architecture of Caral reveals a clear social hierarchy, yet it was one seemingly devoid of coercion. Elite residences were built atop the pyramids or in close proximity to the sacred precincts, constructed with finely dressed stone and plastered walls. In contrast, the commoners lived in simpler dwellings on the periphery, made of cane and mud. Despite these differences in material wealth, the entire city was meticulously planned as a single unit. This suggests a society where status was recognized and respected, likely tied to one's role in the religious or economic machinery that kept the valley thriving for generations. Long before the Inca, the people of Caral may have used the quipu, a system of knotted strings, to record complex information. A primitive version of this device was found in a ritual cache, suggesting that the roots of Andean bookkeeping stretch back 5,000 years. These knots likely tracked the harvest, the distribution of trade goods, or the movements of the stars. In a city without a written script, the quipu was a tactile language, a way to freeze time and memory into a physical form. It represents the dawn of administrative complexity in the ancient Americas, a tool for order. Archaeological analysis of coprolites and skeletal remains provides a glimpse into the daily life and health of the inhabitants. Their diet was remarkably balanced, consisting of various plants like squash, beans, and guava, supplemented by a massive intake of marine protein. Interestingly, the remains show little evidence of infectious diseases or chronic malnutrition, which were common in other early urban centers. This high standard of living suggests that the leaders of Caral successfully managed their resources to ensure the well-being of the populace, recognizing that a healthy workforce was the foundation of their monumental achievements and social stability. Though the city of Caral was eventually abandoned, its legacy became the blueprint for all future Andean civilizations. The concepts of circular plazas, U-shaped temples, and the use of quipus would reappear in the Chavin, the Moche, and finally the Inca Empire. Caral was the mother city, the place where the fundamental DNA of South American culture was first encoded. It proved that a complex, urban society could flourish through cooperation, trade, and science, leaving behind a silent testament to human ingenuity that would wait 5 millennia to be rediscovered by the modern world. The landscape of the Supe Valley was a study in extremes, where the bone-dry desert of the Peruvian coast collided with the narrow, fertile strips of the riverbed. This geography was the crucible of the Caral civilization. Unlike other early societies that huddled in lush marshes, the people of Caral deliberately built their monumental pyramids on the arid terraces above the floodplains. By doing so, they preserved every inch of tillable soil for their precious crops, demonstrating a sophisticated understanding of land management and urban planning that allowed their society to thrive in one of the most inhospitable environments on Earth. To survive the frequent seismic activity of the Andean region, the architects of Caral invented a brilliant engineering solution known as shicras. These were woven vegetable fiber bags filled with large river stones, which were used to fill the interior of the massive platform mounds. When an earthquake struck, these flexible stone-filled nets allowed the structures to shift and absorb the shock without collapsing. This revolutionary technique predates modern seismic engineering by thousands of years, proving that the builders of Caral were not merely masons, but master structural engineers who understood the volatile nature of their world. The sounds of Caral were not dominated by the clashing of blades, but by the melodies of wind instruments. In a ritual cache beneath a grand plaza, archaeologists discovered 32 flutes crafted from the wings of condors and pelicans. These instruments were intricately carved with images of monkeys, birds, and human figures, suggesting a culture deeply invested in the arts and ceremonial performance. Music likely served as a unifying force, a communal language that echoed through the circular plazas during festivals, reinforcing the social bonds that held this complex urban society together without the need for military force. Social stratification was clearly visible in the city's residential architecture, yet it appears to have been remarkably stable. The elite lived in spacious stone complexes atop the great mounds, overlooking the public plazas, while the laborers resided in smaller dwellings made of cane and mud at the city's edge. Despite this hierarchy, the lack of fortified walls between these sectors suggests a society built on mutual dependence rather than coercion. The elites likely provided the administrative and spiritual guidance necessary for large-scale irrigation, while the commoners provided the labor, both groups bound together by a shared religious ideology and economic success. Cotton was the undisputed engine of the Caral economy. While other civilizations focused on grain for trade, Caral specialized in the production of high-quality cotton fibers. They developed a variety of natural colors, from creamy whites to deep browns, which were spun into threads for massive fishing nets and sophisticated textiles. This cotton was the key to their trade network. The inland farmers exchanged their fibers for the abundant protein of the coast. This symbiotic relationship between the valley and the sea created a wealth that allowed for the construction of the city's massive monuments and sustained a growing population. At the heart of the city's spiritual life was the altar of the sacred fire. These small, circular chambers featured a central hearth connected to an elaborate system of underground air ducts. These ducts utilized the Venturi effect, pulling air from the outside to fan the flames into a roar, even in an enclosed space. This mastery of aerodynamics allowed priests to maintain a perpetual fire, which served as a focal point for rituals. The smoke rising from these altars was a signal to the gods and a visible reminder to the citizenry of the city's eternal connection to the divine. The orientation of Caral's pyramids was far from random. Each structure was meticulously aligned with the movements of the stars and the rising of the sun during specific seasons. These monuments functioned as a giant calendar, allowing the priests to predict the flooding of the river and the best times for planting and harvest. For the people of Caral, the city was a mirror of the cosmos, a place where the earthly and celestial realms were perfectly synchronized. This astronomical precision highlights a level of scientific observation that rivaled the contemporary pyramid builders of Giza. Evidence of female leadership emerged with the discovery of the Lady of the Four Brooches, a high-status burial of a woman in her 40s. She was interred with prestigious offerings, including a necklace made of shells and 4 finely carved bone brooches depicting birds and monkeys. Her burial within a sacred space suggests that women held significant political or religious power in Caral. This discovery challenges traditional views of ancient patriarchies, suggesting instead a society where status was determined by lineage or merit rather than gender, and where women played a central role in the city's governance and ritual life. Caral's influence stretched far beyond the Supe Valley through a vast trade network. Archaeologists have found spondylus shells from the warm waters of modern-day Ecuador and sodalite from the high Andes. These exotic goods were not mere trinkets. They were symbols of wealth and cosmic power. The presence of these items proves that Caral was a major commercial hub, orchestrating trade across hundreds of miles of rugged terrain. This economic reach ensured that the city remained a vibrant center of cultural exchange, drawing in ideas and materials from across the continent long before the rise of the later empires. Perhaps the most startling discovery at Caral is what was missing. There is no evidence of warfare. In over 20 years of excavation, researchers have found no defensive walls, no battle-scarred skeletons, and no weapons of war. While other early civilizations were often forged in conflict, Caral seems to have thrived for a millennium through cooperation and trade. This Pax Carolina suggests a unique social model where prosperity was maintained through mutual benefit rather than military might, offering a profound alternative to the history of human civilization as a chronicle of endless conquest. The prosperity of Caral wasn't built on grain, but on the cultivation of industrial cotton. Unlike other civilizations that relied on cereal crops, the Supe Valley people mastered the art of growing varied shades of cotton: white, brown, and mauve. This industrial crop allowed for the creation of massive fishing nets and sturdy textiles. By domesticating this versatile plant, they secured their role as the primary suppliers for the coastal fishing communities, creating a symbiotic relationship that fueled their economy for generations without the need for traditional staple food dominance or the typical agricultural patterns seen in the Near East. To sustain their crops in the arid desert environment, the engineers of Caral developed sophisticated irrigation systems. They diverted water from the Supe River through a network of canals that transformed the dusty landscape into a green oasis. This masterful control of water resources demonstrated a deep understanding of hydraulic engineering and communal labor. Farmers worked in rhythm with the seasons, ensuring that the parched earth received the life-giving flow required to support a growing population. This marked a significant milestone in early American agricultural technology, where the mastery of nature was achieved through intellect rather than conquest. The relationship between the inland city and the Pacific coast was a pillar of their survival. Caral's cotton nets were traded for immense quantities of dried fish, particularly anchovies and sardines. This exchange provided the urban population with a stable source of protein, essential for the physical demands of monumental construction. The coastal fishermen, in turn, benefited from the superior technology of Caral's nets. This protein-rich diet, fueled by the cold, nutrient-dense Humboldt Current, sustained thousands of people, proving that complex societies could flourish through inter-regional cooperation and specialized production long before the advent of conventional farming empires. Within the sacred precincts, music echoed as a bridge between the earthly and the divine. Archaeologists unearthed 32 flutes made of condor and pelican bones, decorated with intricate carvings of monkeys and birds. These instruments were not merely for entertainment. They were central to religious ceremonies performed in the circular plazas. The haunting melodies likely accompanied the smoke of ritual fires, unifying the community through shared auditory experiences. This discovery reveals a culture that valued artistic expression and sonic harmony, using music to reinforce social cohesion and spiritual devotion within their massive, shadow-drenched stone amphitheaters. Fire was a central element of Caral's spiritual life, kept burning in specialized hearths within the temples. These altars of the sacred fire featured a unique ventilation system, underground ducts that used the Venturi effect to draw air and keep the flames intensely hot. In these secluded chambers, priests would make offerings of food and textiles, believing the smoke carried their prayers to the heavens. The meticulous design of these hearths showcases an advanced understanding of physics, used not for industry, but to maintain a perpetual connection with the supernatural forces that govern their world. Building in a seismically active region required revolutionary architectural solutions. The builders of Caral invented the shicra technique, large woven reed bags filled with stones, used as the foundation for their pyramids. These shicras acted as a flexible base, absorbing the energy of earthquakes and preventing the stone structures from collapsing. This ingenious seismic technology allowed their monuments to stand for 5,000 years. It represents a profound harmony with the environment, where the people of the Supe Valley didn't just inhabit the land. They understood its tremors and engineered their civilization to endure them. High above the valley on the desert plateaus, the people of Caral left enigmatic markings. Massive geoglyphs, including a giant face with flowing hair, suggest they practiced sophisticated astronomical observations. By aligning their architecture and these desert drawings with celestial bodies, they tracked the movement of the stars and the arrival of the seasons. This knowledge was crucial for timing their agricultural cycles and religious festivals. These silent sentinels in the sand reveal a civilization that looked toward the cosmos to find order and meaning, integrating the heavens into the very fabric of their urban planning. The layout of Caral reflected a structured social hierarchy. While the elite lived in spacious stone dwellings atop the mounds, the common people occupied smaller, more modest homes on the outskirts. Yet, even the humblest residences were built with care, often using quincha, a combination of wood, cane, and mud. The proximity of these different classes within the city suggests a society that was stratified but unified by a common purpose. This urban design facilitated social interaction and the efficient management of the city's complex economic and ritual activities, maintaining a delicate balance between different social tiers. Long before the Inca, the people of Caral may have used the quipu, a system of knotted strings, for record-keeping. The discovery of an early quipu fragment suggests that they had a method for tracking trade, census data, or astronomical cycles. This form of non-written communication allowed for the management of a complex economy across a vast territory. The ability to store and transmit information was a cornerstone of their administrative success, enabling them to coordinate the labor of thousands and the exchange of goods from diverse ecological zones, ensuring the stability of their civilization for centuries. After a millennium of stability, the Pax Carolina began to fracture, not from war, but from the environment. Successive cycles of extreme El Niño events brought devastating floods, followed by prolonged droughts. The once fertile Supe Valley was slowly choked by encroaching sand dunes as the winds shifted. The irrigation canals, so carefully maintained for centuries, could no longer support the population. Facing an environmental crisis that their technology could not solve, the people were forced to abandon their sacred city. This shift marked the beginning of the end for Caral, as the population dispersed in search of new horizons. As the life-giving Supe River dwindled to a trickle, the exodus began in earnest. Families gathered what little they could carry: woven baskets, stone tools, and precious seeds, leaving behind the sturdy stone homes their ancestors had occupied for generations. This was not a panicked flight, but a somber, calculated retreat from a land that could no longer sustain them. The migration was a slow tide of humanity moving away from the coast, their silhouettes tracing the horizon of a changing world. Each step away from the sacred pyramids was a step into an uncertain future, marking the end of a long era of coastal dominance. In the final days of occupation, the religious leaders of Caral ascended the Great Pyramid for one last ceremony. They sought to appease the forces of nature that had turned against them, lighting sacred fires that flickered against the encroaching darkness. However, the smoke did not bring rain, and the winds only brought more sand. The spiritual connection that had bound the people to this specific valley was fraying. The priests, once the absolute arbiters of social order, now stood as silent witnesses to the inevitable. Their rituals became a poignant farewell to the city that had been the center of their universe for 1,000 years. The refugees of the Supe Valley did not simply vanish. They moved toward the Andean highlands, seeking the reliable water sources of the mountain springs. This transition required a radical adaptation of their lifestyle, moving from coastal fishing and cotton farming to high-altitude agriculture. They carried with them the architectural blueprints of their ancestors and the social structures that had made Caral great. As they ascended into the rugged terrain, the aesthetic of their new settlements began to blend with the harsh mountain environment. The legacy of the coast was being transplanted into the rocky heart of the continent, ensuring the survival of their cultural DNA. The knowledge of the quipu was perhaps the most vital cargo carried during the migration. These knotted strings, more than just mnemonic devices, represented the collective memory and administrative wisdom of Caral. In the new mountain enclaves, the keepers of the strings continued to record the numbers of the people and the yields of the new mountain crops. This portable technology allowed for the continuity of complex social organization, even as the physical city of Caral fell into ruin. The quipu became a bridge across time, a silent thread connecting the first great civilization of the Americas to those that would follow centuries later. Back in the Supe Valley, the silence grew heavy. Without the constant maintenance of the urban population, the Great Pyramid began its slow surrender to the elements. Sand dunes, driven by the relentless coastal winds, climbed the stone staircases and filled the circular plazas. The intricate irrigation canals, once the pride of Caral's engineers, were choked with silt and debris. Nature was not destroying the city so much as it was reclaiming it, wrapping the stone monuments in a protective shroud of earth. For nearly 4 millennia, these structures would remain hidden in plain sight, appearing as nothing more than natural hills to the casual observer. The dispersal of the Caral people acted like a cultural pollination across the region. New centers began to emerge in nearby valleys like the Casma and the Pativilca, each bearing the unmistakable mark of Caral's influence. Sunken circular plazas and U-shaped temple complexes started to appear further inland and along the coast, suggesting that the fundamental concepts of Andean urbanism were born in the Supe Valley. While the original city was gone, its soul lived on in these successor states. This period of fragmentation was actually a time of expansion, as the ideas of the first civilization took root in diverse new environments. To understand the true significance of Caral, one must look toward the other side of the globe. While the builders of the Supe Valley were hauling stone, the pharaohs of Egypt were just beginning the construction of the Great Pyramids at Giza. In Mesopotamia, the city-state of Ur was flourishing. Caral stands as a contemporary to these icons of human achievement, proving that complex civilization in the Americas did not lag behind the Old World. It was a primary civilization, developing independently without the influence of outside cultures. This realization reframes the narrative of human history, placing ancient America at the very beginning of the global story of progress. For thousands of years, the site of Caral remained a mystery, its true nature obscured by time and the shifting sands. Local inhabitants and later civilizations, like the Inca, likely knew of the ruins, but their origins were lost to legend. The mounds were seen as huachas, sacred places with ancient spirits, but their age was completely underestimated. The desert climate, which had forced the people away, ironically became the city's greatest preservationist. Beneath the dry earth, the organic materials like cotton nets and wooden posts remained intact, waiting for the tools of modern science to unlock the secrets of their incredible antiquity. The rediscovery of Caral began in the mid-20th century, but it wasn't until the 1990s that its true scale was revealed. Archaeologist Ruth Shady and her team began the painstaking process of excavating the mounds, uncovering the sophisticated urban planning that had been hidden for millennia. As the sand was brushed away, the sharp angles of the pyramids and the perfectly circular plazas emerged once more into the light. The sheer size of the site challenged existing theories about the development of American civilizations, suggesting a much earlier and more complex origin than anyone had previously dared to imagine. When the first radiocarbon dates were returned from the laboratory, the scientific community was stunned. The samples of woven reed bags used to carry stone, called shicras, dated back to 2600 BCE. This placed Caral far earlier than the Olmecs of Mexico, previously thought to be the mother culture of the Americas. The evidence was undeniable. A complex, organized, and peaceful society had flourished in the Peruvian desert long before the rise of most other known civilizations. This discovery forced a total rewrite of history books, establishing the Supe Valley as one of the 6 independent cradles of civilization in the world. Unlike many ancient empires that relied on the brutal hand of forced labor or military conquest, Caral's expansion suggests a different path of human organization. The massive construction projects were not the result of slaves driven by whips, but of a highly coordinated collective. Families and communities from across the Supe Valley likely contributed labor as a form of social obligation or religious devotion. This cooperative model allowed for the simultaneous building of multiple pyramids and plazas, creating a sense of shared purpose that bound the disparate groups into a single, cohesive urban identity without the need for a standing army. The architects of Caral possessed a sophisticated understanding of their volatile environment. Living in a region prone to frequent and powerful earthquakes, they developed a revolutionary seismic mitigation technique. They filled large, hand-woven reed bags, known as shicras, with heavy stones and layered them within the foundations of their massive pyramids. These flexible bags acted as a primitive but effective shock absorption system, allowing the structures to shift slightly during tremors without collapsing. This engineering brilliance is why the monumental ruins still stand today, having survived 5 millennia of tectonic shifts that would have leveled modern concrete buildings. Perhaps the most striking discovery at Caral is what archaeologists did not find. In a world where early civilizations are often defined by their weaponry and fortifications, Caral is unique. There are no defensive walls, no caches of arrowheads or spears, and no evidence of ritualistic warfare or mutilated remains. This suggests a society built on trade and religious ideology rather than fear and conquest. For over 1,000 years, the people of the Supe Valley lived in a state of relative peace, a historical anomaly that challenges the traditional narrative that war is a necessary catalyst for social complexity. Caral was the heart of a vast and vibrant trade network that stretched from the Pacific coast to the high Andes and even the Amazon basin. Excavations have revealed exotic goods that originated hundreds of miles away. The most prized of these was the spondylus shell, a bright orange-red bivalve found only in the warm waters of modern-day Ecuador. These shells were used as sacred offerings and status symbols, indicating that Caral was not an isolated desert outpost, but a central hub of commerce. This exchange of goods also meant an exchange of ideas, technologies, and cultural practices across the continent. Music played a fundamental role in the spiritual life of Caral. In a hidden cache beneath one of the circular plazas, archaeologists discovered 32 flutes meticulously carved from condor and pelican bones. Each flute was decorated with intricate engravings of birds and monkeys, showcasing a high level of artistic skill. These instruments were likely used during large-scale communal rituals, where the haunting melodies would echo off the stone walls of the plazas. The discovery of these flutes provides a rare glimpse into the sensory world of the ancient residents, proving that their society valued artistic expression as much as engineering. The entire city of Caral was designed with a cosmic orientation, reflecting a deep connection to the heavens. The alignment of the pyramids and the circular plazas suggests that the inhabitants were keen observers of the stars and the movement of the sun. Certain buildings were positioned to mark the summer and winter solstices, serving as a massive stone calendar that dictated the agricultural cycle. For the people of Caral, the sky was not just a source of wonder, but a practical guide for survival, and their architecture was a physical manifestation of their desire to live in harmony with the celestial order. The true wealth of Caral was not gold or silver, but cotton. The inhabitants of the Supe Valley mastered the cultivation of a specific variety of cotton that naturally grew in shades of white, brown, and mauve. This fiber was the engine of their economy. They produced vast quantities of cotton, which was then traded to coastal communities for fish and shellfish. The coastal people used the cotton to create strong, durable fishing nets, which significantly increased their catch. This symbiotic relationship between the farmers of the valley and the fishers of the coast created a surplus of food that fueled the city's growth. Social hierarchy in Caral was present, but appeared to be based on function and religious significance rather than extreme wealth disparity. Archaeologists have identified different types of dwellings, ranging from large, elaborate residential complexes near the pyramids for the elite to simpler, smaller houses for the general population. Despite these differences, there is evidence that the entire community had access to a diverse diet of seafood, squash, and beans. The layout of the city reflects a society that was highly organized and stratified, yet deeply integrated through shared rituals and a common economic system centered on the sacred city. At the heart of several smaller temples lies the altar of the sacred fire. These small, circular rooms featured a central hearth connected to an underground ventilation system that used the wind to keep the fire burning intensely. Evidence of burnt offerings, including chili peppers and small figurines, suggests that fire was a central element of their religious practice. These private ritual spaces contrast with the large public plazas, indicating that Caral's spiritual life operated on both a grand, communal scale and a more intimate, secretive level, where priests or rulers could communicate directly with the divine through the flames. One of the most controversial and exciting finds at Caral is an early form of what might be a quipu, a system of knotted strings used for record-keeping. While famously used by the later Inca Empire to manage their vast realm, the discovery of a quipu-like object in Caral suggests that this complex method of data storage is thousands of years older than previously thought. If these knots represent a form of proto-writing or accounting, it would mean the people of the Supe Valley had developed a way to record information long before most other civilizations in the Americas, further cementing Caral's status as a sophisticated cradle of culture. Beyond their mastery of stone and math, the people of Caral possessed a profound connection to sound. Within the Great Pyramid's depths, archaeologists unearthed a cache of 32 transverse flutes, meticulously crafted from condor and pelican bones. These instruments were decorated with carvings of monkeys and birds, indicating a culture that found divinity in the harmony of nature. These flutes were not mere toys. They were precision-tuned tools of ritual, capable of producing complex melodies that would have echoed through the valley, bridging the gap between the mundane world and the celestial heights they worshipped. Music served as the heartbeat of the Supe Valley, likely accompanying every major sacrifice or solar event. In the circular plazas, massive gatherings would take place where dozens of musicians played in unison, their sounds amplified by the unique acoustics of the surrounding stone walls. These ceremonies weren't just for entertainment. They were essential for social cohesion. The resonance of the bone flutes, combined with the rhythmic thud of drums made of animal hide, created a shared sensory experience that unified the disparate classes of Caral under a single, vibrating spiritual identity. While stone built their temples, it was cotton that fueled their economy. The people of Caral were master agriculturalists who specialized in growing industrial quantities of Gossypium barbadense. Unlike the white cotton we use today, their crops were naturally bred in a spectrum of colors, shades of brown, beige, and soft blue. This allowed them to produce complex textiles without the need for dyes. This cotton was the Supe Valley gold, a high-value trade commodity that allowed them to procure goods from across the continent, proving that their civilization was built on a foundation of sophisticated genetic selection. The relationship between the inland farmers and the coastal fishermen was formalized through the exchange of this cotton. The farmers provided massive quantities of strong, durable fiber, which the coastal dwellers fashioned into enormous fishing nets. These nets allowed for a massive increase in the caloric intake of the entire civilization, as they could now harvest thousands of sardines and anchovies at a time. This synergy between the land and the sea was the engine of Caral's longevity, demonstrating an early understanding of integrated supply chains and regional economic interdependence. Caral's influence stretched far beyond the Supe Valley, reaching into the distant Amazon rainforest and the high Andes. Excavations have revealed spondylus shells from the warm waters of modern-day Ecuador and vibrant tropical bird feathers from the eastern jungles. These exotic items were symbols of high status and spiritual power, suggesting that Caral was a major hub in a vast continental trade network. The city was a cosmopolitan center where ideas, languages, and technologies were traded alongside luxury goods, making it the intellectual and economic heart of ancient South America. Living in one of the most seismically active regions on Earth, the architects of Caral developed an ingenious solution to protect their massive pyramids: the shicra. These were hand-woven vegetable fiber bags filled with large river stones, which were placed within the foundations of the buildings. During an earthquake, the shicras allowed the stones to shift and move independently, absorbing the seismic energy and preventing the stone structures from collapsing. This sophisticated engineering preceded modern base isolation techniques by thousands of years, showcasing a civilization that had mastered the art of living in harmony with a volatile landscape. For over a millennium, Caral thrived in a state of relative peace, but the environment that sustained them eventually began to turn. Around 1800 BCE, a series of prolonged droughts and devastating mega El Niño events struck the region. The predictable rains failed, and the once lush river valleys began to dry up. The delicate balance between the cotton fields and the sea was shattered as torrential floods buried the coastal fishing grounds in silt, while the inland canals were choked by sand. The gods of the fire and wind seemed to have abandoned the Supe Valley. As the agricultural yields plummeted, the social fabric of Caral began to fray. The once sacred fire altars, which had burned for centuries, likely saw increasingly desperate offerings as the priests pleaded for the return of the water. Tensions rose as the population struggled to maintain their dietary standards. Evidence suggests that the people attempted to modify their irrigation systems to capture the last trickles of the river, but the encroaching desert was relentless. The monumental labor required to maintain the pyramids became impossible to sustain when survival itself was at stake in the scorched valley. The end of Caral was not a violent conquest, but a slow, sorrowful exodus. Families began to migrate away from the Supe Valley in search of more reliable water sources in the higher altitudes of the Andes. There are no signs of warfare or massacres. Instead, the city was simply left behind. One by one, the great residential complexes were emptied, and the sacred fires were allowed to go cold. The people took their knowledge of weaving, architecture, and mathematics with them, planting the seeds for future Andean civilizations like the Chavin and the Inca. As the last inhabitants departed, the desert winds claimed the city. For nearly 4,000 years, the shifting sands of the Peruvian coast acted as a protective shroud, burying the stone pyramids and circular plazas under massive dunes. The memory of Caral faded into myth, then into total obscurity, until its rediscovery in the late 20th century. Today, it stands as a silent testament to the ingenuity of the human spirit, a reminder that the foundations of American civilization were laid not in conflict, but in the harmonious pursuit of art, science, and trade. Though the city eventually fell silent, its architectural DNA survived. The tiered pyramids and circular plazas established at Caral became the blueprint for the Chavin, the Moche, and eventually the Great Inca Empire. These later cultures adopted the sacred geometry and the precise orientation of buildings toward the stars, a celestial alignment first mastered in the Supe Valley. The ghost of Caral's engineering lived on through millennia of South American history, whisperings of a foundational knowledge that never truly vanished, but rather evolved into the monumental stone wonders we admire across the Andes today. For centuries, the mounds of Caral were dismissed as natural hills or late-period ruins of little consequence. It wasn't until the mid-1990s that archaeologists looked closer at the weathered, uneven terrain. They realized that beneath the thick crust of the Peruvian desert lay a structured urban environment, far older than anyone had dared to imagine. As the first layers of sand were carefully brushed away, the sharp angles of the pyramids began to pierce through the dunes once more. This was not just another site. It was a revelation that would rewrite the timeline of human civilization in the Americas. Dr. Ruth Shady Solis led the intensive study that finally shattered the conventional timeline. Using radiocarbon dating on reed bags, shicras, used by the original builders to transport stone, she proved the site was inhabited as early as 3000 BCE. This placed Caral on the same chronological pedestal as the Great Pyramids of Giza and the early cities of Mesopotamia. The world was forced to acknowledge that a sophisticated, complex society had emerged in the Americas much earlier than previously thought. Caral wasn't just a local wonder. It was one of the 6 primary cradles of civilization in human history. In a single corner of a circular plaza, archaeologists discovered a cache of 32 flutes carved from condor and pelican bones. These instruments, decorated with intricate carvings of monkeys and birds, suggest that Caral was a place of vibrant cultural expression and communal gatherings. Music likely echoed through the stone corridors, accompanying religious rites or trade festivals. This discovery shifted the perspective of Caral from a sterile administrative center to a living, breathing community that valued the arts. It revealed a society that sought harmony not just through architecture, but through the haunting melodies of the wind. One of the most enigmatic finds was a quipu, a complex arrangement of knotted strings used for record-keeping. While famously used by the later Inca, the presence of such a device at Caral suggests that the fundamental concepts of data management and accounting were established 5,000 years ago. These strings could track grain stores, trade agreements, or astronomical cycles, providing a sophisticated alternative to written language. The quipu represents the intellectual rigor of the Supe people, proving they possessed a high level of organizational capability that allowed their society to thrive for over a millennium without a traditional alphabet. Unlike many contemporary and later civilizations, Caral yielded no evidence of warfare. There were no defensive walls, no stockpiles of weapons, and no mutilated remains of conflict found during decades of excavation. This suggests a unique societal model based on mutual benefit and trade rather than conquest. The people of Caral seem to have lived in a prolonged state of peace, focusing their resources on massive public works and scientific observation. In a world often defined by the history of battle, Caral stands as a profound anomaly, a complex state that maintained order through cooperation and shared spiritual beliefs. The prosperity of Caral was fueled by an extensive trade network that stretched from the Pacific coast to the depths of the Amazon rainforest. Archaeologists found spondylus shells from the warm northern waters and exotic bird feathers from the jungle, items that could only be obtained through organized long-distance exchange. Caral acted as a central hub, a grand marketplace where coastal cotton was traded for highland wool and jungle medicines. This economic connectivity fostered a diverse culture and ensured that even in a desert valley, the citizens of Caral enjoyed the riches of a vast and varied continent. In 2009, UNESCO recognized the sacred city of Caral-Supe as a World Heritage Site, cementing its status as a treasure of global importance. Today, it is a place of pilgrimage for those seeking to understand the roots of urban life in the Western Hemisphere. Preservation efforts continue to protect the fragile mud and stone structures from the modern elements and encroaching urbanization. The site serves as a bridge between the distant past and the present, offering a tangible link to the ancestors who first dared to build monuments against the sky. It remains a site of ongoing discovery and wonder. The story of Caral is more than a historical curiosity. It is a cautionary tale about the relationship between humanity and the environment. Their collapse, driven by climate shifts and dwindling water, mirrors the challenges faced by modern urban centers today. By studying how the Supe people adapted and ultimately how they failed to overcome the desert's encroachment, we gain valuable insights into sustainability and resilience. The silence of the ruins speaks volumes about the fragility of civilization when confronted with the overwhelming power of nature, urging us to respect the ecological balance that sustains our own global society. As the sun sets over the Supe Valley, the shadows of the pyramids lengthen across the sand, reaching toward a future they helped create. Caral remains a silent sentinel of the human spirit's enduring drive to organize, to create and to understand the universe. Though its people are long gone, their legacy is etched into the very landscape of the Americas. From the first fire lit in a circular plaza to the modern aspirations of today, the flame of civilization that began here continues to burn. Caral is not just a ruin, it is the heartbeat of a continent's history.